Broadcasting from the OCTV studios, this is From the Third Eye with Hunter Parker, right here on OCTV.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 6. Can you believe it, folks? It's episode 6 already. Holy crap. Of From the Third Eye, I'm Hunter Parker, your host as always, and today, as promised, we're going to go through a series of how to start a podcast. Today we're going to focus on what a podcast is, where it came from, to the best of my knowledge, and we'll continue on from there. There will be no bashing zone today, or the next show in 2 weeks when we continue the series. There most likely won't be one then either, so we're taking a break from that for a little bit. But we're going to I'm responding to a viewer's question about how a podcast is started. They wanted to start a podcast of their own, didn't know how to do it, so I'm going to go through everything right here for you guys and give you guys an idea of what you need to do and what you need to know. So, I guess we can start by saying, what is a podcast? Well, a podcast is kind of like a radio broadcast, if you think of it that way. Except it's mostly pre-recorded usually. There are video podcasts out there like this one. And there is also audio podcasts, which is just the audio, no visuals. Podcasts became popular when the iPod first came out in 2004 or 5, I believe is when they came out. That's when podcasts started. That's where the term podcast comes from. The term podcast, the pod is coming from the iPod when Apple released that originally. That's where podcasts used to be exclusive to the iPod. Now podcasts can be heard on any platform you can imagine, from your Alexa device to your computer to still the iPod and the iPad and your phones. There's plenty of podcast directories out there now. There's Spotify, there's TuneIn Radio. Not that people use TuneIn very much anymore. There's iHeartRadio, Odyssey, Amazon. And of course, there's still Apple, which podcasts were exclusive to back in the day when they started because of the iPod. So they were in the iTunes store. And submitting your podcast to Apple back then was, excuse my French, a pain in the ass. So they were not very easy to do. They're still not that easy to submit. You have to have a Podcast Connect account, which is through your Apple ID, and you have to do all this stuff. I don't typically submit my shows to Apple because I find it rather cumbersome to do that. But I'll get into all that later. So they used to be exclusive to the iTunes store because of the iPod being an Apple product. But again, now you can submit your podcast to pretty much anything you want. There's all different kinds of directories out there. And a lot of your podcast hosting providers nowadays allow you to click a button and submit directly to those directories. If they don't allow you to do that, they do typically give you instructions on how to submit to the various directories that are out there, which that's the key to a successful podcast. You want to get the word out. So if you submit your podcast to as many directories as you can, that definitely helps your show. And we'll get into more about that later. Now, the next thing I want to mention is, what do you need in order to do a podcast? Well, that's a good question. And it's a very easy question to answer. All you need is an idea for your show. What kind of a show are you going to do? Is it going to be a show about music, a show about movies, just general conversation? Are you going to do an audio drama where each week is a continuation of the show? Some people do that. You got to know what kind of a show you're going to do. What kind of audience are you going to attract with your show? As far as what equipment you need, all you really need is a good microphone, not necessarily a expensive microphone like I'm using right now. But you do need a microphone. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. You could get a headset microphone for about $20 at Walmart, probably, or Best Buy, and maybe a little bit more. That's pretty much all you really need. And recording software. There's plenty of recording softwares out there. Audacity is one that's pretty popular. That's free. There's also one called Goldwave if you're those who are visually impaired who want a program that's accessible. Goldwave is not free. You can get a yearly license for $19 a year. The license does not auto-renew. You have to purchase a new license every year, which is kind of annoying, but hey, it works out. That's what I do. You can buy a license for Goldwave for, I think it's like $50 or something, where it doesn't expire. I personally just renew it every year. It's easier that way. You can find that at goldwave.com, by the way. That's goldwave.com. Check it out. It's a very good software to use. And of course, there's more expensive options like Adobe Audition or things like that. If you have a Mac, you can use GarageBand, which comes with your computer. You don't even really need anything fancy for recording. All you need is something to record your voice. You don't need a full-on intro for your show like I have, where I have a professional voiceover on it and things. I mean, you can do that as well. I will go over all that stuff later, where you can get these voice work if you want a professional voiceover for your intro. You can do that if you'd like, but you don't have to do that. You can do whatever you're comfortable with. So that's pretty much the equipment that you need. The recording software, a good microphone. Make sure you're in a quiet setting if you can, so that way there's less background noise in your show. You can also use recording programs on your phone if you would like as well. There's recording programs on apps for Android you can use. For an iPhone, you can either use the Voice Memos app, or if you use Dropbox, there's an app called RecUp, R-E-C-U-P. You can find it in the App Store. I think it's $4 something to get the app, I believe. It's been a long time since I've done it, so I don't know exactly. And that will actually, when you're done recording, it saves an MP3 straight to your Dropbox folder in the RecUp Memos folder that it creates. That's a useful tool as well if you want something to record with on the fly. So that's how that works. So now, the last thing that I will mention for this part of the series of how to start a podcast before we next time we're going to go into podcast hosting providers, both free and paid options, as well as web hosting providers. If you would like a website for your show, of course, if you know how to do that kind of stuff, develop websites with HTML and things, that's great. Obviously, I'm not going to go into detail of that, how to do that, of course, but I will get into all that next time. But the last thing that I'm going to mention, because I do have a couple announcements to get to before we go, so that'll take up the rest of the time. The last thing I want to mention is as far as rules for your podcast. Some people may wonder, what can you do on your podcast? What can you say on your podcast? Is it monitored by the FCC like radio is? The answer to that question is no. Podcasts, you can typically say and do whatever you want for the most part. I mean, if you're going to promote something that's illegal, you probably can't do that, obviously. But if you want to swear, you want to drop the F-bombs, you want to, do all that kind of stuff, that's completely up to you. You can do that if you wish. There's no rules really you need to follow. I mean, really the only rule is you can't play copyrighted material on your podcast unless you have written permission from the copyright owner. Now there is an exception to that. I'll give you a perfect example. There's a podcast out there. A guy, excuse me, a guy. He's from England, and he decided to create a fan-made reimagining of the old Power Rangers series. He calls it Power Rangers: The Audio Drama, and really great podcast. It's a, like I said, audio drama. So each week or each one he does every month or so, it's a continuation of the story. And some of the storylines from the original series are there. Some of the story has been altered, so it's not exact to what the TV show was. Some of the characters, like for those who remember the series, the villain Rita Repulsa, that name was changed to Rita Bandora, for example. Another difference from the TV show is everybody knew each other. Jason and all the Power Rangers knew each other. They went to school together. They were in Angel Grove High. That's different in the audio drama. The Power Rangers, when they first met, except for Jason and Kimberly, they did not know each other, and they lived in different states. Jason lived in Chicago, for example, where Kimberly lived in Angel Grove, California. So the story is a little bit different now. What he does, because he has original music for the show. The theme song is the same as the original series, Go Go Power Rangers. You know what I'm talking about. The reason he's able to get away with it and not get in trouble is because he states the line, "No, we're not affiliated with any of the creators of Power Rangers. No copyright infringement intended." If you say that line and say it that way during your credits, then they're not going to come after you, and they're not going to say, "Oh, well, you're violating copyright," because you clearly stated that you're not infringing on copyrights intentionally. And he's been doing this for a few years now, since prior to the pandemic. He's done like 52 episodes so far, 3 seasons, and he hasn't gotten in trouble or anything for it because of that reason. And a lot of people, even some of the original cast from the Power Rangers series back in the 90s, have found it, and they think it's even better than the TV show that they did. So you can check that out if you want. But so you got to make sure if you're gonna play something. Now the rule is usually if you're gonna play something that's copyrighted, you can only play so many seconds of it. I think it's like 10 seconds of it or something. But typically you want to stay away from that. So that way there's no problems. So that's really the only rule, is you can't play copyrighted material, or you're not supposed to. On the next episode in 2 weeks, which will be recorded on the 16th of June, or July rather, I don't even know what it is, July, I'll be going into hosting your episodes, where can you put them, things like that. So that's all we're going to cover for that for this week. Now, as I said, we have a couple announcements to get to before we close for today's show. The first announcement, my internet radio station, WHDP Radio, is launching this coming Sunday, July 7th at noon Eastern Time. So you can find out more information about the show, or about the station, WHDPradio.co4, that's the number 4, .in is the website. WHDPradio.co4.in. That's the site. You'll be able to tune in at noon on July 7th. The programming for Sunday night will be starting at 6:30 p.m. with the Amateur Radio News Line, which is a ham radio news program that they're giving us permission to play. At 7 will be episode 1 of Power Rangers: The Audio Drama. At 8 is All Things Radio, which is a podcast all about radio stations and things like that. And after that will be the CBS Radio Mystery Theater that will be featuring to close out the night. So check that out. That's Sunday, July 7th at noon. WHDPradio.co4.in is the website. Check it out. It launches this Sunday. You don't want to miss it. As far as some announcements regarding the show here, I will be making some adjustments to the website coming up this week. One, I realized that I have a Facebook page for the show, which I don't promote very much, which I should. So you can like the show on Facebook if you'd like. Just search for From the Third Eye, and you'll find it there. I'm going to link the Facebook page to the website, and I'm also going to be adding the Bashing Zone bashing board to the website, which has been set up and ready to go. You'll be able to set up an account and bash to your heart's content on that message board. There'll be a link to that on the navigation bar as well. Speaking of the Bashing Zone, the Bashing Zone is going to be getting its own version of a radio show. All uncensored, everything goes. I'll be spreading the F-bombs and the this and the that and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be a blast, and that's where another reason where the bashing board will come in handy. That will be premiering on July 12th at 8 p.m. over on WHDP Radio. If you missed the show or want an archive of the episode, there will be a podcast of it available after the show airs on the station. So check that out. I was going to do a audiobook of the week on Friday nights, but I realized that I don't have permission to play the books that I want to feature, so I can't do that. So the Bashing Zone will get its own radio show for a half hour or so. And the goal is to do the show live eventually, once I get proper equipment to do that. So that's definitely something to look forward to as well. But it will be on WHDP Radio starting July 12th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So check that out. That's to come. I'm also in the works of developing a message board for the show where you'll be able to sign up for an account and have general conversations about whatever you want. No bashing on this board, please. There'll be different boards you can choose from, a general discussion board, a recipe board, technology board, things like that. That'll be coming to the website soon as well once I get that working and configured properly. So there you go with that. So with all that said, that's going to do it for this edition of From the Third Eye. We're back in 2 weeks as always for episode 7, where I will continue my series on the how to start a podcast. As I said, we're going to go into podcast hosting services, free and paid options, web hosting, what not to do, what to do, things like that. And we'll go from there. So if you have any questions or anything, you can reach me anytime. Just fill out the contact form on the show's website, fromthethirdeye.altervista.org. That's From the Third Eye, all spelled out, .altervista.org. Everything's there. Again, don't forget to check out WHDP Radio starting on the 7th, whdpradio.co4.in. And with all that said, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like the show on Facebook as well. Facebook.com/FromTheThirdEye, I believe is what it is. You can search for it on Facebook if you can't find it. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in a couple weeks for episode 7. I'm Hunter Parker. Thanks for listening.